Hi guys, this is John back with another inbox review. This time we're dealing with an unusual aircraft subject. As you can see in front of you, there's a North American OV-10 Bronco. This is a Luftwaffe serving aircraft, an OV-10A, with all the day-glow colourings on it. The Bronco is an interesting subject because it was actually a dedicated design to the coin. Coin stands for counterinsurgency, and it's the role that the aircraft was specifically designed for. And it was the first aircraft specifically designed for this role, and it did extremely well during the latter stages of the Vietnam War, taking over from the O-1 and the Cessna O-2 variants for liaison and command observation aircraft, but it also replaced a lot of the A-1 Sky Raider roles when the aircraft served with the Marines as well as the United States Air Force. And it stayed in service with the USAF for quite a number of years, right up through until I would say probably the mid-80s. But it was still in service with the German Air Force. I think it's still in service with the German Air Force now in this role of counter-insurgents and liaison, spotting aircraft, reconnaissance, that sort of thing. But it's also utilised in various specialist roles with the OV-10D. So that's the aircraft subject. We'll start off with a boxing history like normal. The aircraft that I'm actually doing a review on is basically this kit, but it's not this box. This is the Hasegawa AMT boxing, and this was the first issue of the OV-10A Bronco produced by Hasegawa. But Hasegawa wasn't the only company that introduced this kit in a different box, and it's the Frog version that I'm doing an in-box review on. The Frog variant is actually the Hasegawa kit. The Hasegawa AMT, of course, is the American release company for Hasegawa, and that was released originally in 1968, which was very shortly after the aircraft entered service with the Marine Corps and the United States Air Force. The second boxing in 1968 was of Hasegawa's own brand. Again, you had markings for the US Air Force and the Marine Corps, and it's classed as a fighter, but the aircraft certainly wasn't a fighter. It was more involved in ground attack and counterinsurgency. And the weapons fit you have on this image here is the exact weapons fit you have on the Frog kit and the Hasegawa kit. And bearing in mind, if you buy a Frog kit or a Hasegawa kit, it is actually exactly the same kit that you're getting inside the box. So that's 1968 Hasegawa's release. In 1969, Frog released the kit, and this is the model that I'll actually be doing an in-box review. The Frog kit has different markings to the Hasegawa model, and I like the boxing, the way that Frog boxed their kits, because, and I'll show you in more detail when I show you the box before I open it up. Airfix took a leaf out of Frog's boxing methods by advertising a lot of their kits on the side of the box, but Frog actually did something that a lot of people didn't do, and I'll get into that in a minute when I open the box. But you can see there's a number of models that Frog produce on the side of this box as well. You've got the Mashi C202, the Tempest, the Hawker Hurricane, the Hawker Sea Fury, and the Fairy Gannet on the side there. So that's the 1969 Frog boxing issue. In 1970, Hasegawa released what I would consider to be their first proper Hasegawa boxing of this kit. Sorry about the size of the image, it's not very big, because I can't actually get a photo JPEG image of this. I can only get a pristine image, which won't download into a format that my computer will recognise, so it's have to be viewed on the Opera browser. But that's the Hasegawa release, which was released in 1970. 1970 laid way to the Minicraft intervention into Hasegawa's boxing. This is 1972. The same box as the 1970 release, but Minicraft got involved. I'm not sure whether Minicraft is actually a brand name for Hasegawa, or whether it's a company that marketed the kit in a certain country for Hasegawa. I'm not sure. Maybe America, maybe Europe. I'm not. I haven't got any evidence to suggest either. But that's the Hasegawa 1972 edition. In 1973, Hasegawa started to release what I call the orange bar range. For obvious reasons, you have the Hasegawa brand logo on top of an orange bar at the left-hand side of the middle of the box there. And this image is a new painting of the aircraft in action during Vietnam. This image carried through for quite a number of years on their boxes. So that's the orange bar branding from 1973. Then they went over to this type of branding in 1977. This again is Minicraft Hasegawa, and it's the OV-10A Bronco again. This time, I believe it's only in US Marines markings. But don't get me wrong, I've never actually seen inside this box, so don't quote us. But again, it's the same image as the Vietnam scenario that they had on the previous box. So 1977 went through to 1978, and this is still the orange bar markings as we went through before, but this time you've got another logo on here, which is Hales. Now Hales is a company that I believe I'm sure Hales took over ownership of Hasegawa in the late 70s, because a lot of companies went into serious problems. Plastic modelling companies went into serious problems in the late 70s. Matchbox went into serious problems. Airfix were running into serious problems. Revell were big enough to sort of cover themselves and sway through the issues. But Hasegawa was another victim, and I'm sure Hales bought Hasegawa up in 1978. They kept their logo and boxing overall apparent look with the orange bar, and the Bronco was released in this box with the same image on the front depicting its service in Vietnam. 1978 went through to 1980, and the company went into what I call the blue bar phase. Same box, virtually identical to the orange bar, but they changed this bar with the Hasegawa logo into a blue bar. This one had sort of goldish, I would say goldish brown. I'm sure that's OV-10A in Japanese on the bottom here. And this colour here changed as the blue box labels went through. So 1980 was that boxing. 1981 was the Minicraft Hasegawa boxing again. No sign of Hales here, so I'm going to have to do some research and see what actually happened in 1978 with Hales and Hasegawa. But this is the mini box Hasegawa release. Interesting because they came away from the painted image of the Bronco in service to an image of the model built up. And as you can see, it's actually a half decent looking kit, isn't it? The Frog Hasegawa model actually isn't that bad. It's not brilliant in terms of accuracy, but it's not that bad. So 1981 went through into what I class as the more modern image of Hasegawa, calling themselves now Hasegawa Hobby Kits. This is 1988's release, and the kit's logo here is in orange. So it's like a throwback to the orange labelling they used to have on the boxes in the 70s. But again, they've changed the image of the aircraft on the front of the box, and I actually quite like this boxing. It shows you the Bronco in quite a nice light. The white top to the wing and the underside in light grey. I think it might actually be light grey, that top coating to the wing there. But again, it's exactly the same kit as you got in 1968. So that's 1988 image, and now you've got 1992's image where the colour of the OV-10A Bronco labelling has changed to this sort of dark sea grey colour. Again, Hasegawa Hobby Kits, and it's the same image, the same box, it's just changed this labelling in 1992. And then lastly, in 1994, Hasegawa retooled the Bronco to incorporate the OV-10D's long nose variant. The long nose variant had additional avionics in it to perform more specialised tasks, such as counterinsurgency and electronic reconnaissance, SINJIT reconnaissance. And the aircraft performed this task for the Marine Corps and the USAF very, very avidly, and also the long-nose variant was utilised by the German Luftwaffe. So that's the boxing history, 1994. I just want to leave you with an image of the long-nose variant, as you can see there. That's a USAF aircraft. And I believe this aircraft is still in operational service now. The propellers have changed quite dramatically, as you can see. I think they're Garrett engines rather than the old Avco Lycoming engines that powered the Bronco in the 60s. But yeah, it's a nice looking aircraft. I've always liked the look of the Bronco. It's got a nice look about it. So now, what I want to do quickly now is I want to firstly I want to get this charge lead off the computer, because I had an issue last night. I tried to record this video last night, and the damn camera ran out of power, and yeah, everything else is history, isn't it? So what I want to do is I want to bring this camera around to here. Sorry about this, lads. It's a bit of a pain in the arse, I know, but here we go. Bring it down to the table so you can see what I'm actually doing a review on, and then hopefully. Let's see if I can bring that into there a little bit more. There we go. I want to bring this camera up quite a lot more and then tip. This new camera mount I've got is a little bit of a pain in the arse here and there, but it's a lot more versatile than the old one I had, and it can produce different angles for the inbox reviews. So this is the model I'm doing an inbox review on today. It's the Frog 1969 issue of the North American OV-10A Bronco. And as I said before, this is actually a Hasegawa kit inside the box. And Hasegawa and Frog did this with quite a number of their kits. Namely, well, to name some of them, the Vigilante was one, the Black Widow was one, the North American Sabre that Frog released was one, the Mosquito was another kit. An awful lot of their models were actually Hasegawa kits, reboxed in Frog boxings. Now, before I open this box, I just want to show you. There's the images I showed you before on the box that was issued on the computer. You've got the Fairy Gannet, the Sea Fury, the Hurricane there, the Tempest, and the Massey MC202. And this is off this guy that I buy kits off here and there, who likes to cover everything in brown tape, which is fantastic. Yeah. But when you open the box, Frog did something else that a lot of companies didn't do. They had more adverts on the inside of the lower lips of the box, and you have the F5 Northrop Freedom Fighter, the Westland Lysander, you had the Shackleton here, the Avro Lancaster, the Jo-87G Stuka, the Fokker D21 and the Messerschmitt Me410. On the other inside edge you've got two more, the Black Widow and the Sabre. And it always amazes me that Frog did this with a lot of their boxes, because nobody else copied it. Airfix tried to copy it by putting images of some of their other kits on the outside edge of the top lid of their boxes, but they never did it on the inside edge. And I like what Frog did about that. We'll leave the parts in the bag for now, and we'll have a look at the instruction leaflet. First of all, before we look at the front instruction, to show you the build sequences of the kit, I just want to show you what's on the back. This is what you got in a 1960s Frog kit for an instruction leaflet. On the back you have quite large, clearly ID'd instructions and methods of constructions and hints and tips. And I do believe that Frog were the only company to do this in this scale with these pictorial images. Matchbox did it as well, and so did Revell on a number of their older kits, but they weren't on this size scale, clearly showing you how to make this model and how to make other models, because not all of this stuff is applicable to the Bronco kit. A lot of it is applicable to other models. I mean, for instance, this one here was only applicable to Italian aircraft and maybe a few German aircraft that had the mottled look in the Mediterranean theatre, but everything else was pretty clear. And I like what they did here. They showed you, clearly use enamel paints, because obviously acrylic paints weren't available in the 60s. neither was contact adhesive on a brush, obviously. But each one of these stages, like tape up the airframe, is all clearly written out so that you can understand exactly what they mean by the pictures that they show. And it's really, really interesting that Frog did this. I like this touch, it was good. And on the front, this is a very typical Frog instruction leaflet. You have the ID of the kit, the Frog North American OV-10A Bronco on the top left-hand corner, and there's a few bits and pieces of icons showing you methods of construction. That's correct. There are icons here which you have cement, do not cement. You have I think that's shape with a heated knife. That's options. And that is cut with a knife. So you have lots of icons here, and some of these icons are used, not all of them, but some of them are used in this construction of this kit. Now then, the kit builds up in 11 sections, but typical of Frog, a lot of the sections are very small number of parts. For instance, here you have in section 1 the Sidewinder missiles and the rocket rails. The missile rails there, and there's only really 2 of these, so that has to be doubled up. You have the oleo main gears and the wheels in section 2, and these obviously, because there's 2 main oleo legs and wheels, that's doubled up. And then here you have the drop tank, which is featured again in section 5, but there's only 1 of these because it goes in the centre pylon underneath the fuselage. Section 4, you're building the forward section of the turboprop engine and prop assembly. There's 2 of those, that has to be doubled up. And there's your no cement, do not cement icon that goes into there. And you've got a cement icon here because you have to cement the prop to the back of the spinner boss, and then put the pin through the front of the engine assembly into the retainer at the back. And that's all clearly showed with the icons. And it's pretty idiot proof. You don't get a huge amount of this in modern kits. Section 5, you've got your armaments stub wing assembly with the 4 bombs and the drop tank you built in section 3. And then in section 6 you start to build the airframe. And the airframe consists of the forward fuselage there, the interior of the cockpit, 2 seats and 2 pilots. Now, it doesn't state this in the kit, but I would strongly recommend you use a serious amount of heavy weight in that nose, because this kit is extremely heavy behind the main oleo gears, because it's a twin boom kit with 2 tail fins and a tail plane that goes across the top. And every model that is made in this method, every airframe that utilises this arrangement is going to be extremely heavy in its tail. So I would put at least 2 or 3 pieces of lead in that nose cone if you can, and then pack it in with plasticine so it doesn't go anywhere. Section 7, you fit the armaments rack to the underside of the fuselage, and then there's a pitot tube there at the nose. And also you fit the glazing to form the cockpit canopy. Now, I don't tend to fit the cockpit canopy until I've painted the aircraft, because I always find it easier to paint the canopy frames when they're not attached to the airframe. It's a lot easier to get the straight lines narrow enough to make it look nice before you put the canopy onto the aircraft. Section 8, you've got 2 twin booms, obviously, so this has to be doubled up. And then you've got your 2 propeller assemblies from section 4, which go on the front of there, and there's 2 stub exhausts which fit onto the side of the tail booms as well. Section 9 is the wing assembly, which comprises of 2 parts. Section 10, you fit the airframe all together, twin booms, the wing, and the tail plane, which is part 46, and the balance tab 38 there, which goes on the top of the tail plane. Now then, section 11 will determine whether you have put enough weight into the nose or not, because you fit the main undercarriage oleo legs into place, the rocket rails, the nose wheel, and all the doors. And there's also another, looks like a blade aerial that goes on the front of one of those engine booms. Now, if you wanted to detail this kit slightly further, the early variants of the Bronco had 2 aerials which came out of the upper surfaces of the twin booms just behind the wing, and they were whip aerials, so they were generally bended backwards virtually at all times, even when the plane was on the ground. but they had one on each of the top surfaces of the fuselage, of the tail booms behind the wing. So that is something you can utilize. You can incorporate with maybe a piece of expanded sprue under a heat source. So that's your instruction leaflet. The paint guide is not on the instructions. The paint guide is on the back of the box. And unfortunately with this kit, because he's covered it in brown tape, it's not easy to show you what the paint guide incorporates, but it's actually quite a good one. As you can see here, there's two variants. There's the USAF version, which is a 6th pre-production tri-service aircraft. It's an evaluation airplane from the US Air Force, and from the Marine Corps. And you've got this one, which is the US Air Force version, which is the 4,410th crew training aircraft. And this was the aircraft that was used to train the crew in how to fly the OV-10 before it went into service. There's also another piece of information here which is quite interesting, and I'm going to include quite a lot of this in future videos, is the origins of the manufacturer. This kit is actually made in Great Britain by a company called Rovex Industries Limited, and Rovex Industries Limited was the parent company that owned Frog, and they were based in England. I can't remember exactly where the kit was made in England, but that probably wouldn't be too difficult to find out. But it is definitely a British company, and Frog was one of the first plastic model manufacturers in Britain. They were about long before Airfix started building serious numbers of models. They were about an awful lot longer before Revell entered the scene. Although Revell isn't a British company, it's an American company that also has a large holdings in Germany. But Frog was one of the founder plastic model manufacturers in the UK. They started producing kits seriously before 1950, and they actually had plastic products coming off their assembly line in 1935 to 36 before World War II. So Frog is a very important company in terms of the plastic model industry, but sadly they're no longer. But some of their kits are still available through, believe it or not, Revell and Hasegawa, and also through a company called Eastern Express. And there are a couple of other companies in Russia and Poland, I believe, that also produce some Frog kits. But Eastern Express used to do the entirety of Frog's range. But I'm not sure if they're still current at the moment. But you can still get Eastern Express kits quite easily. Right, that's the instructions in the box. Now we'll have a look at the transfers, and the transfers are a bit of a sorry state, really, to be honest with you. They're very typical of late 60s transfers, and these are in quite good condition, but unfortunately they're going to require an awful lot of work if I want to use them at all. The transfers are quite nicely rendered, actually. The register on them is quite good. The stars and bars, there's no misangled or out of line colours and bars on those American stars and bars. The actual walkways look quite good. The definition on the numbers USAF and all the numbers according to the kit's requirements on these decal sheets are quite good, and you can read. I mean, if I pull that out, you can even read quite a lot of what is written in the white sections there. But the transfers have this rather horrible yellowish backing film, and that's a problem if you want to build anything that isn't yellow, because it's going to show a mile away. But what you can do, I might have some transfers in my transfer box that might be able to replace some of these danger signs, and maybe even some of these, but you could theoretically trim them right down with an extremely sharp knife and cut all this backing film away, and they should still water slide off this this sheet quite easily. But we'll have to see what I can do about that, because those transfers are pretty awful, aren't they? The backing sheet is really quite poor. The transfers themselves are actually quite thick as well, so I'm not expecting that backing film to disappear even with gloss varnish. But the actual transfers themselves are quite good in terms of the register and the quality of the transfer, but the backing film is pretty dire. That's a shame. I don't know what's written in those two sections of backing film there, but they're quite large, aren't they? but you should be able to cut a lot of that away. And the roundels don't seem to carry much backing film at all, which is good news. So the decals, they are a bit of an issue, but I don't know. You might be able to use them if you're careful to cut away some of this backing film away. Right. Now I'm going to take the parts out of this kit to show you what we've got in here. Now, unfortunately, I know there are a couple of parts missing in this kit, but they're not parts that I have an issue with because they're the two Sidewinder missiles. And I'm pretty sure I've got a Sidewinder missile or two hanging around somewhere. Now then, there's 4 sprues altogether in green plastic and a transparency sprue here, so that makes 5 sprues altogether. But what we'll do is we'll go through the individual parts and we'll start with the transparencies because that's always a good place. In this bag we've got the top section of the canopy here, and it's actually quite crystal clear. I'm not going to take it out of the bag because I don't want to get it damaged prior to building, but as you can see there, can you see that there? It's quite a nice piece of plastic and it's lovely and clear, and yeah, that's going to be quite nice. I'm quite pleased with that. Here you have the forward windshield. There's a bit of a tab on the side there which will need removing, but the forward windshield is quite crystal clear. It's a nice piece of canopy that. Can't really see my fingerprints through it, but 1968 parts. I wasn't expecting to, but it is a nice clear canopy. You're going to be able to see quite a bit of the detail of the kit through that canopy. Here are the canopy side windows. The frames on the window, they are marked, but they're not embossed, so you're going to have to be quite careful about painting those frames up. But the painting frames on a canopy is an awful lot easier when they're actually attached to this sprue, because you can hold the sprue and use the paintbrush to get into where you need to get it into. And there's another good tip about painting canopy frames. If you use acrylic paint, paint the frames up. You don't have to be so pedantic about painting the frames and getting them rich and nice and crystal clear and thin, because you can use a cocktail stick to scrub away excess paint where you don't want it. And acrylic paint comes away from clear plastic parts like this extremely easily if the cocktail stick is sharp enough, and the cocktail stick being made of wood will not damage the plastic parts. It's a good tip there for people who don't necessarily want to go to the expense of a mask and things like that. Now then, I want to start with the top wing, because the top wing, yeah, it's got a little bit of burr on it here and there, but it's not bad. But the thing I want to show you about the top wing is that, yes, it's got raised panel lines, right? Now, apart from the ailerons and the flaps where they join to the aircraft's wing, which are recessed panel lines, the rest of the lines on this kit are actually raised. But, and here's the big but, they're actually quite nice and mild. They're quite fine, and I don't really think it's going to be an issue if you use some form of a wash to highlight the raised panel lines to make them look recessed after the kit's been finished. And it's nice to see this. There's a few burrs and tabs on the kit and a bit of flash here and there, but you expect it in a 1969 moulding. But it's a nice piece of plastic. It's nicely detailed. I am quite surprised at the amount of detail that are in the panel lines on this kit. It's really nice to see this, but this obviously is because it's a Hasegawa kit, not a Frog kit. If it was a Frog kit, I wouldn't expect hardly any of those lines to be there. I would expect them to be quite bereft of detail. The fuselage halves. The fuselage halves, this gives you an idea of what the shape of the fuselage is going to look like. It's like this. There we go. I'll open it back up so you can see the detail inside, which is absolutely nothing. There is two halves of an instrument panel there, which you can see. But the actual kit itself, it's nice and crisply moulded. It's quite nice. It's a good fit. I'm not expecting there to be any issues with the fuselage fit on this kit. And yeah, I think, you know, the cockpit itself is quite a large piece of glazing. You're going to be able to see quite a bit of the detail inside that. But the fuselage fits together very, very nicely. The tailplane on the back here, again, it's quite bereft of panel lines, but then there probably aren't many panel lines on this kit anyway. There's a little bit of a scuff mark on that part there, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. It'll paint over nice. And again, the elevator, the full length elevator, is a recessed section that joins to the tailplane section there again, and the balance tab goes there in the middle in that tab there. The underside is quite clean. There is a raised panel line going across the front of the leading edge of that tailplane, and it's nicely reproduced. It's nice and fine. It's not really going to be an issue. I don't think you're going to need to sand any of these lines down whatsoever. Here's one of the twin boom outer sections. The outer sections actually incorporate the fin as one piece, which I always quite like, because then you've got no lines going to mess about with and any things to fill up here. And this part here goes into this fuselage half here, and as you can see, it's not a bad fit, is it? It looks like it's going to go together quite nicely. Not a bad fit. I quite like the look of that. It looks all right. So it's a bit bereft of locating tabs and holes, but you know, that's not really an issue either. You can jig it together, it'll go together quite nice. The main gear well here looks a bit plain, and it's again typical of the fact that you're going to have a big line there which you're going to have to do something with. And there's something else here. The undercarriage oleo leg fits into this hole here at the front of the main well, and as you can see, there's not an awful lot of room here to put any weight in here that's going to make any significant difference to the balance of the kit. So all the weight is going to have to go inside the nose of the plane, and it doesn't give you an awful lot of room to put a lot of weight, so I'd recommend you use lead. Just to recap again, there are some raised panel lines on this kit, but they are quite fine. This part here has a few raised panel lines here and there. There's some on the rudders, but they are quite fine, and I don't think they're that. I don't think they're going to be that much of a problem in terms of having to deal with them. I don't think they're going to be an issue whatsoever. So that's the boom. That's one of the inner booms. Again, you've got raised panel line that goes down the top of there, but it's not really an issue. And the fits on this airframe is quite good. But I'll talk about something in a minute. This is the ammo stub wing. I think it's the upper side. The lower side is the bit that you fit all the parts to. And this again is quite bereft of detail, but the Bronco's main stub wings were. They did have 4 cannons in the front there, which are faithfully reproduced. They're quite finely reproduced. Bit of burr on that twin cannon set there, but apart from removing them quite nicely, it shouldn't be an issue. So that's the parts loose. Now let's have a look at the sprues. There's your rocket. That's your bomb rack, and the drop tank fits in the middle there. That's quite nice, quite nicely moulded. That's the other twin boom outer section there. Again, it's the same as the other side. It's quite nicely moulded with the nice fine raised lines. Not too much of a problem. The propeller's nicely moulded there. A bit of flash on the prop, but it's not serious. There are your 4 slick bombs, and that's your propeller spinner bags that fit there. The parts are quite nice. They're typical Hasegawa parts from the 60s. I built a few Hasegawa kits that were engineered in the 60s, and this is very typical of their parts and the way the sprues are laid out. If this was a frog kit, the sprues would look very different, and they would have rounded edges here with maybe a triangular tab in the middle of each corner, and a lot of the parts would actually be attached to the sprue on 3 or 4 different sections, so it's more difficult to cut parts out from a frog kit. But the Hasegawa kit is quite nice. There is a little bit of flash here and there, but you've got to remember the age of the model. I am expecting there to be flash. The nose wheel there is actually quite nicely moulded. You can see that there. It's quite a nice piece, isn't it? I think it will actually look quite nice. Although it's an old kit, I don't think it's a bad one. It's certainly not a howler, not by any stretch of the imagination. That's the lower wing section there. Again, that's quite nice, isn't it? Quite like the look of that. Very fine raised panel lines. There's the drop tank, the front of the engines, the main wheels. All the parts are quite nicely detailed. The pilots, however, are a bit of an abortion, aren't they? Yeah, there's a lot of flash on them, but they're not very nicely moulded pilots. I don't tend to put a lot of pilots into my kits anyway, so I'm not altogether that upset about that. You've got the pilot seats here, nicely backed, quite plainly fronted, but yeah, they're not too bad. There's a few other bits and bobs, the retainers, there's a couple of aerials and the pitot tubes sat in there, look. They're quite nicely moulded. That's the cockpit floor. Not very detailed, not very interesting at all really, it's just like a bathtub base. But basically all the parts are there, except for my Sidewinder missiles. For some reason they were missing, but I'm pretty sure I've got a couple of Sidewinder missiles in my parts spare box. So what I'd like to do now is just go through the info sheet, and I want to go through some of the options that are available. So before I shut this video off, I'm just going to go through the information on the kit itself and give you a few kits to watch out for and a few ideas of costings and things. The model itself is a Frog North American OV-10A Bronco. Its serial number is F265 and it's moulded in 1/72nd scale. The kit comprises 51 green plastic parts on 4 sprues and 4 transparency parts on 1 sprue, totaling 55 parts in total. The decals cover 2 versions, the 6th pre-production tri-service evaluation aircraft and the 4,410th Combat Crew Training Wing based at Eglin Air Force Base for the United States Air Force. The dimensions of the kit measures about 6¼ inches long, it measures 6½ inches in span, and it's roughly 2.25, that's 2¼ inches high from the to the top of the main tail boom when it's sat on its undercarriage. Now there are a few options available for the Bronco, and I do want to mention them because some of them are quite good and some of them aren't so good. You can actually get a 1/144 scale model of this kit through a company called Hornet Mini Wings, but beware, this kit is not an injection moulded kit, it's a resin kit, and its detail, bearing in mind it's 144 scale, so you wouldn't expect a huge amount of detail, but the detail is quite waxy and the parts are quite difficult to remove from the blocks that the kit is moulded on, and it's not for a novice, or I would say this kit is really an advanced modeller's kit. I have no idea of the price because I've never seen it on any sales media site, and I've never seen it in any shops, but I do know of the I do know that the kit is about, and that you can get it if you really want to, and you can find it and you search hard enough for it. There are quite a lot of options in 1/72nd scale. There's obviously the Frog kit, which is really the Hasegawa model, and that kit retails for between £6 to £15. The option itself of the Hasegawa Frog kit, I would say, isn't too bad in terms of the fact that it's a 1968 release, and its detailing and overall appearance and accuracy is on average for that age. It's not too bad. There is a Revel kit on the market which originated around about the same era, about 1968. Beware of this one because typical Revel kits of that era, they weren't great. They weren't great at all. And this one has carried through right through to the modern day boxings of the Revel kit. And it does retail for from £3.50, I've seen it as cheap as £3.50 up to about £15. But in my opinion it's not as good as the Hasegawa Frog model. The best model on the market, if you want an OV-10A, is the Academy kit. Quite easily acquirable. You can get this kit on quite a lot of the sales media sites. Very easily indeed. It retails for around about £10. But there is another model which is worth mentioning and worth looking out for if you want to build the OV-10A or the OV-10D, because both variants were covered by Airfix. The early releases were the OV-10A, and they later released the kit under the Palitoy ownership in the 80s as the OV-10D with the extended long nose. And Hasegawa did the extended long nose in their 90s later editions as well. So those two kits are worth looking at, but I think the Hasegawa kit is just a retooled old OV-10A variant. And I think the Airfix kit is a retooled OV-10 variant as well, because it doesn't have a separate fuselage. But both those two kits, but the Airfix kit is actually quite nice. The Academy kit is the best of the lot, but the Airfix kit isn't bad. It's not a bad option. The Airfix kit retails for between £7 and £17. So if you hold out for the price, you can sometimes get it cheaper than £7, but it's usually around about £10 if you can buy it. You can get the Bronco in 1/48 scale. It's only ever manufactured originally by Hawk, but Testers and Italeri did rebox the Hawk kit, and that retails for about £10 to £22, depending on how many of them are on the sites and how readily available it is. But there is another kit which is also worthy of note, and that's the Kitty Hawk model, which is available in 1/32 scale. Now this model is a beaut. It's a really, really nice kit, but it does have a really, really nice high price tag. I've never seen it cheaper than £50, and I have seen it as high as £65 to £70. So if you want to buy a Kitty Hawk 32nd scale Bronco, it's a beautiful kit, but you will have to pay quite a bit of money for it. It's sort of up there on the price of Kinetic and Tamiya models in 32nd scale. So conclusions. Overall, the Hasegawa Frog kit is very dated and it shows its 68 origins. I'm not sure which company produced the plastic for this kit, whether it was originally a Frog kit or originally a Hasegawa kit, but looking at the sprues, they do look Hasegawa-ish, far more than Frog, and I'm tempted to say that Frog reboxed the Hasegawa kit a year after its release by Hasegawa. It is fairly rare, as are all the early offerings, and so it's a little pricey, in my opinion, for what it is. But you can still pick them up cheapish if you're lucky. I can see it being an enjoyable build, but don't expect a model that is really accurate, and do expect fit issues, as the kit almost certainly will have them. The kit depicts, well, the Bronco's arrangement is a twin tail-boomed aircraft with a tailplane going across between the two tail fins, and this arrangement doesn't lend to an easy construction because you have to align the parts up really, really carefully. Otherwise, it's filler city. So be aware that when you're building the airframe, it's often a serious problem to make sure that everything is lined up. Now, the best 72nd scale kits are by far the Academy and the Airfix kits. The Airfix kit is good, but the Academy kit is actually slightly better. But the Airfix kit does come in A and was later retooled with a long-nose D variant. And the long-nose D variant, in my opinion, is the best option if you want a D variant, is to buy an Airfix one. So that's my actual conclusions. I do think that the Frog kit, or if you can get hold of a Hasegawa kit, isn't a bad option for the Bronco if you want an A variant. But you are probably better off getting the Academy kit. But I did get this quite cheap. I didn't pay a huge amount of money for it. And I am interested in seeing how it comes out. The parts look quite reasonable. Not sure about the accuracy, because the accuracy on some of these early kits was often pretty poor. So again, I look forward to seeing how this kit goes together. Not sure what I'm going to do with the decals yet, but we'll go into that later in the build progress video. If you like what you see, give me a like. If you haven't subscribed yet and you like what you see, subscribe. I really appreciate new subscribers and likes on my videos. It's very nice to see that what I'm doing is liked by others. If you do dislike the video, and I've had a few dislikes here and there, please give a comment, because I'm not closed to the fact that something could be improved. So if you like what you see, check out some of my other videos, and hopefully this video has been of some use to you. So I'll see you again for the next one, lads, and have fun modelling. Bye bye for now.